Hi, and welcome to this talk on how to design better virtual conferences. We are Sue Allen and Josh Gutwell, and we are co-directors of the Clean Conferencing Institute. So just briefly, our motivation for doing this work is really twofold. One thing that we're trying to do is to really make professional associations more accessible in terms of their professional development at conferences to more people and making them more accessible as well as more inclusive. And the second part of our focus is really we want to reduce carbon emissions because people flying to conferences turn out to be a significant part of the overall US climate emissions. Our vision for doing this work is to have conferences at all kinds of associations alternate between in-person and virtual meetings. So we're not trying to do away altogether with in-person conferences because they're extremely valuable, as you know, but we thought if people could alternate, and some organizations are already doing this, it can get the best of both worlds. If you want to check out our website for more information, we are www.cleanconferencing.org. And just briefly, our theory of action of what we're trying to do here is to say that we're focusing on those aspects of virtual conferences that we think are the most problematic for people. And the idea here is that we are trying to really support more dynamic interactions and meaningful conversations among the attendees. And these may be serendipitous or they may be planned. Both are very important. Then in terms of our theory, we have a three-legged stool for thinking about how to design better virtual conferences. And what we're going to do is to go through each of the legs of the stool: platforms, activities, and social norms. And we're just going to give you some examples of the work that we're doing and where we think some of the innovations are going to be particularly helpful. So Josh, did you want to take away platforms?
Yes, great. Thank you so much, Sue. So the first thing to think about when designing a virtual conference is what platform do we want to use for our conference? And it turns out there are many platforms that are beyond kind of the Zoom platform that we're using right now, or Google Meet or Microsoft Teams. Those kinds of platforms, the Google Meets, the Zooms, those are really good if you're trying to talk in a single group of people, have like a whole group discussion, or if you're trying to do what Sue and I are doing right now, make a presentation. So it's kind of like one-to-many communication style. But there are other platforms that offer other kinds of formats and features. So for example, there are spatial platforms, like this one is Spatial Chat, where people can move themselves around and only hear and see the people who are close to them. And this is great if you want to have people form their own groups or put themselves on a line or spectrum and then talk about that sort of thing. If you want people in small groups, of course, Zoom has breakout rooms, but even better than that, we think, are platforms like AirMeet, where they have round tables. And what's cool about these round tables is you can see who's already sitting at the table before you enter. So instead of like an opaque breakout room in Zoom, you kind of have a window into who you're going to be talking with. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But these platforms often also have one-on-one kind of speed networking, and that can be done in a variety of different ways: random assignment or even matching people based on their shared interests. And then some platforms also have exhibit halls, 3D imagery, where you can see all the different booths and then select the booth you want to go to and talk to the exhibitors at that booth. And there's also poster sessions can be held in these kinds of halls. We'll give an example of that kind of thing in a little bit. I wanted to show you a video of this. Speaking of the poster halls, I want to show you a video of people in a spatial environment in a poster session. So this is one of the rooms in the poster session. It has 3 different posters, and you can see people are moving around and talking with the presenter. And we can only see the people who we are close to, and we can even move away from a poster and have kind of a sidebar conversation in the bottom left to talk with folks. So that's just an example of using the spatial attributes of one of these spatial conferencing platforms um, to have a poster session or other kinds of activities. Okay, so that was the first leg, platforms. Sue, do you want to talk a little bit about designing dynamic virtual activities?
Sure. Thanks, Josh. So activities. One of the things we noticed is that in typical conferences, there tend to be two, roughly speaking, two kinds of different activities that you can participate in. And one set of them, we call them static activities. That's the places where you kind of sit in a chair and listen. So those are the lectures, some of the group discussions, and workshops. And we contrast this with some of the things that we call dynamic activities, where participants at the conference get to visit exhibit halls, go to evening events, talk to each other during coffee breaks, the less formal things where the events where the participants can really make choices about what they're seeing and who they're talking to and move themselves around. So that's typical for an in-person conference. And we've been realizing, looking at the literature, that in the virtual case, these green circles, the dynamic ones, are often drastically reduced, or even not included at all. During the pandemic, there were just none of them at all. And even now, after several years, these are much less developed than the lectures, group discussions, and workshops. So this is where we are focusing in our work, is trying to make those feel more engaging. And we've been doing quite a bit of thinking about what characteristics define these different groups. I won't go into that, but we've been studying them and thinking about their characteristics so that we can try to improve them. And yep, next slide. Yep. So Josh, did you want to give us some examples of what such dynamic activities might look like?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, so one thing that we've been experimenting with is a pre-conference buddy event. So here's where we match people up either using AI and profiles or randomly assigning folks to be buddies, pairs, and these can be mentor mentee or could they just be colleagues. And then holding a virtual event before the conference, before the virtual conference, where they get to meet each other, they get to chat a little bit, talk about the kinds of sessions they're each interested in going to, and the conference organizers can tell everyone a little bit about what the conference is going to be like and give them sort of a sneak preview. And that can really reduce the amount of shyness and sort of apprehension that people might feel coming into the virtual conference, just knowing that they have a buddy there and can meet up with somebody and talk about what their experience has been at the conference. Another example of a dynamic activity is what we are calling after mingles. So this is very similar to in the real world when you go to a conference. After a session has ended, oftentimes people hang around and chat with each other, maybe go up to the panelists and ask them some questions. And so we're trying this in the virtual world where after a session is completely over, the Q&A has ended, having a space opened up where people can either talk with the presenter or just talk with one another seems like it's working quite well. And so here again, this is Air Meets roundtables. These can be used to very good effect for an after mingle because you can see who's at the different tables. Each table can have a different topic. We've even experimented with using artificial intelligence to generate provocative discussion questions after the talk is over about the talk. Or you could talk to the presenter. So, and here, and then once you're in one of these roundtables, it looks very much like a Zoom call that people are kind of used to already. So those are a couple of examples of dynamic activities. Sue, do you want to talk a little bit about the AI-powered networking that we've been looking at recently?
Sure. Yeah, so this was the third example we just wanted to share. One of the places that AI has really made huge progress in recent times and continues to is in the idea of really effective recommender engines is the technical term, but it's really just the idea of helping people find the people they really want to be talking with, whether those are friends or whether those are people that they don't know, people who have certain characteristics, people who are experts in the field, or maybe people who are peers rather than experts, and so on. So there are all these ways that we can characterize uh, people's interests and profiles, and that has really made huge strides. So now we wanted to just go back to our stool again and talk a little bit about the third leg, the social norms leg of designing good virtual conferences. Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so a very important piece that's often left out of or conference planning, and especially in the virtual space, is what are the norms that we're going to use to talk with one another. And so just to give you an example of some social norms that you're probably already familiar with, we all have kind of learned through the pandemic that if you're in a large Zoom room, you should mute yourself when you're not speaking, and that way people don't hear all the background noise that can come from folks being unmuted. Or if you're going to leave the room for a minute, but you want people to know you're coming back, you can type BRB, be right back in the chat. So there are norms for using platforms. There are also norms, though, for interacting with other people. So if we were in a spatial platform like the ones that I've been showing, and you're wanting to join a conversation, you might not really know how to join a group where they're already having a conversation. But what an organizer can do is at the beginning of that session, they could introduce a norm. They could say, when you're looking to join a group conversation, just hover nearby and someone will invite you in. And so that's an example of a social norm that could be articulated and would just kind of smooth the interactions a little bit for everybody. Then there's also norms for facilitation. So a lot of times when people are going into small groups, we want them to kind of facilitate themselves. We want them to spontaneously work together. And so we might introduce norms like when your group first starts up, just someone volunteer to facilitate. Or hey, when you guys are talking, just try to pay attention to turn taking, just to make sure that everybody has a chance to say something if they want to. So offering up these norms can really help groups work together. And we've been looking at this and kind of analyzing the different situations where we might want to introduce social norms. And so just like the examples I gave, they're in the using the platform, there's a whole bunch of ways where we might want to introduce norms. When we're having people interact with one another, there are norms we would want to introduce around joining groups or leaving conversations, things like that. And when we want people to facilitate themselves, there are norms we probably want to introduce there as well. So, Sue, back to you to bring it all together.
Thanks, Josh. So we've looked at these three legs of our stool: platforms, activities, and social norms. And obviously, even though we've talked about them separately, they are very interconnected. And that's just the last point we want to make, is that the activities that you're going to do at your conference will really affect the platform that you want to use so that it supports those activities. And of course, the social norms will also be supporting what you want to achieve in your activities. So we just want to say that designing to optimize all three of these together can really create a powerful experience that will be both stimulating and rewarding and fun for your conference attendees. So thank you for listening, and we welcome your questions and comments.
Yes, thanks, everyone.